and Sue Gray has sensationally quit, although some suggest it was
Sue Gray was told to
ousting.
quit. Yes.
This is her role as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, over fears that she'd become a distraction, plunging Number 10 into disarray.
You see, I think all of this is fascinating because this shows how ruthless Starmer is. He appoints this woman controversially, creates a lot of headlines. Surely he knew what the headlines were going to be. We go to Oscar Reddrop now, former advisor to Boris Johnson, on this to get his views on things. Oscar, well, quelle surprise.
Yeah, politics is very, very brutal business, isn't it? I mean, just so cutthroat. I have to say, I think probably it's fair to say the writing was completely on the wall. It was the beginning of the end when you saw those really aggressive stories, from within Number 10. People briefing, about her salary, how she kind of, as the gatekeeper, because a lot of people go, I don't know what a special advisor is, don't know what's so special about them, what do they do? Her predominant function as Chief of Staff is that gatekeeper, and I think people thought there was a bottleneck. She was kind of guarding that gate too aggressively, and now she's out.
Here's the thing. She's Chief of Staff. That means she's boss. She's boss of everybody, except she's not. So two people come into Starmer's office and they say, "Oi, we don't like what your woman's doing here. We want rid of her." Who has that power?
I think part of the problem was no one was quite sure who had that power. And
Starmer has the power overall.
Starmer has the power overall, I would say, but he always strikes me as someone who likes special advisors doing their thing and, being quite present, whereas some prime ministers...
See, Oscar, what we've got here is he then takes Sue Gray in and he says, look, Sue, we've got a problem here. You're boss woman here, but I can't have you as boss woman. Let's think of something else we can give you and make this look OK, and you can keep your 137,000 quid as well.
I'm quite surprised by this new role. They've kind of, envoyed to the nation.
There's no rule. It's a ridiculous rule.
Exactly. Because as someone who worked for Boris, I should be completely my predisposition should be to really despise Sue Gray. But she's had an incredible career in the civil service. I almost don't know why she needs it. You have nothing to prove to anyone. And on a personal level, it would have been brutal for her the last few months.
Well, Starmer is said to have had opposition from within the cabinet to getting rid of her. Some people supported her within the cabinet. A lot of the mayors liked her, including Andy Burnham. So presumably this role plays on the fact that she worked hard in Northern Ireland to try and iron out a few of the problems there with Westminster, and also works well with the mayors. That they've created this role to give her sort of graceful exit, as it were. I suppose the question is now, who is this Morgan McSweeney, who is the new Chief of Staff? He seems to have this unprecedented control over now the Treasury and Downing Street. He's got no experience of Whitehall or of government. He's a strategist. What sort of person is he? Can he kickstart what's been a disastrous, it's almost 100 days for Starmer?
Well, yeah, I think from their perspective, they will just hope that he can give that political edge that a career civil servant was not able to do. I mean, there's a thing called the grid, where the government, Number 10, decide, the news stories of the day, the priorities. And there were just some really odd, basic errors when you saw, the winter fuel payment announcement happening during the same week as the train drivers were getting their big payout. Just, really basic errors. You'd think that someone like Morgan would be able to completely cut all that stuff out. But I think every time a new team goes into Number 10, and do not get me wrong, I was part of one, it's always, the grown-ups are back in charge, everything's going to run really smoothly now, we've had a clear out. It never happens. I think we're all slightly addicted to the psychodrama of these personalities. And I think most regular people are just exactly, perfect phrase.
Regular people. Regular people would look at this situation and say, you're going to cut winter fuel allowance to pensioners? No, that's not a pretty good idea for a socialist government. You're going to put Sue Gray in charge of... She moves from being top civil servant to being a top figure within the Labour Party. That ain't going to go down well. I mean, a blind man and a galloping horse can see that this is nonsense. So Starmer, and he is ruthless, right? He's ruthless in getting what he wants. Why does he get it so wrong on these big decisions?
Well, I think specifically with the Sue Gray appointment, I think he probably couldn't resist the Boris, Sue Gray kind of backstory. It did the trick, didn't it? It felt like the ultimate kind of headshot kill. And I don't think he thought long-term about how it would actually work. You know, the first 100 days of government was the precise element of her role. I mean, it's been 100 days of toing and froing, no real genuine kind of direction and ambition and consistency.
They've been on the back foot, haven't they?
Yeah, and that's...
Your boss, ex-boss, Boris Johnson, was in here yesterday. Camilla Tominey did a very long sit-down with him about his new book, and one of the topics that came up was Sue Gray. Now, this was before the shock announcement in the afternoon that she was ousted/quit. But let's have a listen to what he said about his nemesis, Sue Gray.
How about Sue Gray? Is she responsible for your demise? What did you make of her appointment as Starmer's chief of staff?
I thought it was extraordinary, to be honest. But there you go. But look, but again, you asked me about mistakes I made. I shouldn't have appointed her and asked her to do that thing. And
why?
I made.
Do you think that she?
Well, because it turned out what I didn't know, though, was she'd already been approached to be the chief of staff of Ed Miliband, and
who you're very close to on the net zero front.
And he and I were at the same primary school.
But Sue Gray, should she not have been appointed? Should she not have that role in Downing Street? She's in a very influential position.
I think that, look, I mean, it's far be it from me to intrude on Labour's private grief, but, you know, I do wonder what the hell on earth is going on with those guys. I mean, you know, this guy, Wahid Ali, why is he giving money to... What was it about this MP called Conlon that made him...
money for wallpaper and things.
No, on the contrary, as soon as I knew that money going into what was then the ill-fated refurbishment fund for the whole of Number 10, as soon as I knew that it had come from a particular Tory donor, I paid him back in full, because I thought I cannot be, even though the money was going on the blooming Number 10 flat, which was, you know, not something that I owned.
Well, do you think Starmer's getting an easy ride compared to how you were treated when you made these sorts of errors? Is he getting off lightly with donorgate and
I'm
freebies?
sure people were totally right to try to beat me up and, you know, whatever. That's politics. And look, I don't blame the Tory party for wanting to chuck me out if they thought that was genuinely, you know, that's what Tories do. That's how they behave.
Regicidal.
I tried to explain to them that it would not end well.
Okay.
And it didn't.
Hasn't even ended yet. Now, Oscar, that was getting your blood pressure up. So what was particularly...
You had to advise that man.
Yeah.
What would you have advised him about that interview?
Well, look, I think it's good to see him again. It's good to see him again. Look, I think how he resisted really kind of sticking the boot on Sue Gray is interesting. I think that Teflon Boris does apply sometimes in a very personal way, in that he probably doesn't hold a grudge on it at this point anymore.
But he couldn't answer a single question without obfuscating or smirking, or it was a very, very difficult interview for Camilla Tominey, who had to almost be schoolmarmish in saying, you're distracting again, Boris. No, that's not what I asked you. I don't want to know what school Ed Miliband went to. I'm asking you about this. And he was off on tangents. I mean, was that what they talk about the shopping trolley analogy? He was a bit like that, wasn't he?
Well, there's a real fine line because, you know, you watch someone like Keir Starmer who looks like he's been, you know, plugged in by, you know, kind of generic robot AI technology. And then you see someone with genuine charisma, and when you interview someone who has thoughts and naturally coming to their head, they're not pre-rehearsed, he's actually thinking about what he's saying.
But
however, you know, you want sometimes structure and you want genuine real insight and kind of like that professionalism that gives you that insight.
OK, let's talk about Sue Gray, shall we? She says she's quit. It's quite clear she was ousted. Is this an example of Sir Keir Starmer finally being ruthless?
Look, Sue is a dedicated public servant, both for the Keir Starmer and as a civil servant before her. And she can't defend herself in the media if she's not a politician. So I want to say thank you for what she's done, but it's obviously right that the Prime Minister can try and make sure that he's got the team that he needs in Number 10 so that he can deliver for the whole country.
Was preventing him from delivering for the whole country and wasn't the right team. Was she presiding over the chaos behind closed doors at Number 10?
I honestly think the public's not terribly interested in this kind of gossip about what happens within Number 10. They're just interested in a government that delivers, and that's what I think we'd be doing.
Well, except with respect, I mean, she was paid more than the Prime Minister, funded by the taxpayer, and a lot of people are saying the first 100 days or so in power have been a disaster. So I would argue that the British public are extremely interested on what's gone on behind closed doors. Perhaps you might be more willing to divulge a bit about what we can expect from Morgan McSweeney, who's now taken over in that role of Chief of Staff, but has almost, unprecedented control of both Downing Street and the Treasury.
Firstly, I don't at all accept in the first 100 days that this government has been a disaster. We've made real progress across a whole range of issues that really make a difference to my constituents in Lincoln. Whether that's a pay rise for the junior doctors at Lincoln Hospital, stopping the previous government's terrible plans for Scampton, ending no fault evictions under the Renters' Bill. We've been making progress across a whole range of areas, so I don't think I accept the question.
In the same week, forgive me, announcing millions of pensioners would be without a winter fuel payment this winter. The same week that you gave inflation-busting pay rises to train drivers who are already on £70,000, not a resounding success. This week alone, we've heard about the Chagos Islands being handed away. We've got UK forces on red alert after Argentina have now vowed to recapture the islands. And your flagship policy on private schools seems to be in tatters. You think this has been a success, do you?
I do think it's been a success. I think it's been full of difficult choices which reflect the difficult inheritance that we've got as we become the government. But I think Keir Starmer and the rest of the government is getting on with the job that the British public elected us to do.
The British public didn't elect the government to introduce these winter fuel payments. You got no mandate for that. In fact, you've kept very quiet on it altogether, which is why it's so problematic for the British public.
Well, I think on the winter fuel allowance, we've been pretty clear that we inherited a worse fiscal position than we expected. The OBR has said so.
Yes, but we've also heard that you've got more headroom coming from the Bank of England with which you get to choose how you spend it. And as you say, this is about political choices, and you're choosing to use it to make inflation-busting pay rises whilst taking money away from pensioners.
So in terms of the headroom that the Bank of England says might be coming on October the 30th, the Chancellor will set out the budget. And in relation to the winter fuel allowance, look, no government would want to make these kind of choices, but we had to make in-year cuts. And we're taking steps to try and make sure the very most vulnerable are protected.
OK, well, we're going to speak now to the Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Chris Philp, who joins us, I believe, from Westminster. Good morning to you, Mr Philp. Thanks for your time. Can we start with the sort of big Westminster news, really, about the ousting of Sue Gray? Is this good news for the Conservatives or bad news?
Good morning. Well, look, I think what this shows us is that Keir Starmer's government has collapsed into chaos after just 93 days. He can't even run his own number 10 Downing Street operation, let alone run the country. Frankly, this has all fallen apart a lot faster than I was expecting. But this sort of chaos at the heart of Downing Street shows us why they've made so many mistakes, whether that's scrapping the winter fuel payment for almost every pensioner in the whole country, including pensioners on very low incomes, huge pay rises for their trade union paymasters, including train drivers who already earn £65,000 per year, tax rises to come in the budget. Keir Starmer still tucking into freebies more than any other member of Parliament over the last 5 years. Free clothes, free glasses, free clothes for his wife, free stay in an £18 million penthouse. The list goes on and on. It's no surprise that his opinion poll ratings have collapsed so catastrophically.
Chris.
And I think this Sue Gray debacle is an example of that.
Well, it is a surprise, Chris, in that all the mistakes that you have highlighted are glaringly obvious. Novices wouldn't make those mistakes.
Well, so I didn't quite catch the question, but they are terrible mistakes, and any competent Prime Minister would have avoided making them. So it shows that Keir Starmer made a mistake by appointing Sue Gray in the first place. It was an error of judgment, and it shows he can't even run Downing Street, let alone run the country.